We want to make sure and thank our sponsors for this season on agentic AI. Infor. Most AI can't tell the difference between a yield loss and a rounding error. Infor leads with AI built from the ground up for the food industry, from demand forecasting to shelf life to catch weights. That's precision. See how at infor.com. Hello, and welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech. Today, we are continuing our look at agentic AI and what it could mean for the produce and agriculture industry. There's no shortage of excitement around AI right now, but it can be difficult to separate what's genuinely useful from what's simply the latest technology hype. My guest is Shail Khiyara, CEO of Swarm. Swarm is working with companies to use AI to solve complex operational and business problems. Welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech. It's great to have you.
Vonnie, thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. Great to be here.
So let's start with Swarm, a very interesting company that I've known for quite a number of years. I've been very excited to watch you grow and make an impact on the industry. So how do you describe what the company does and what kinds of problems are your customers asking you to solve?
Yeah, look, we are a decision intelligence company and we help solve problems in supply chain, logistics, workforce planning for many ag and agri-food companies. I spend years on the ground in heavy industrial operations, worked on gas oil separation plants, infrastructure mega projects where bad decisions don't just cost money, right? It costs safety, it costs delays, and that's the lens that I'm building Swarm with. You know, everyone's trying to sell agriculture and manufacturing a chatbot right now, or agentic AI, which I know we'll get into. We build something different. Swarm is it's not a generic horizontal AI. It's a vertical domain specific solution that learns your business over time. And because in these industries, the cost of a slow or a generic decision isn't just inconvenience, it's real money, it's real waste, it's real risk. And that's what we help mitigate for our customers.
So, as you mentioned, where does agentic AI fit into the solutions that you're building?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about agentic AI, and you and I sit in Silicon Valley where there's tremendous amount of hype around this as well. I often tend to look at agentic AI from a framework called IRA, which I've put together. It stands for IRAA. Think about it as I'll give you an example. Think about booking a trip, right? A system just shows you what the flight prices are, and that system isn't necessarily agentic. It's just a lookup tool. One that's genuinely agentic is intelligent. It understands your actual constraints, not just the cheapest fare, but your calendar and your preferences. It's responsive, so that's the R in the IRA. It moves the moment the prices shift. Not something that is an overnight batch job. It's autonomous. It can rebook you without you approving any single step, and it's accountable. If it moves your flight, it tells you exactly why. So there's explainability built in. So that's IRAA or IRA: intelligent, responsive, autonomous, accountable. You miss any one of these four, and it's not agentic. It's automation with a new label. And that's exactly
Interesting.
where agentic AI fits into what we build at Swarm. We don't stop at just optimization. We actually build Ava, which is a ontology trained AI agent trained in the ontology and lexicon of ag that can actually comprehend your query, not just search for keywords. It's vertically trained. It's not sitting on top of a generic horizontal foundation, which means it isn't guessing its way to an answer or hallucinating a plausible response. It's reasons through problems step by step. You can get chain of thought. You can get explainability. All of that is built in from the start, not bolted on. So it's just as intelligent and responsive. And can show you exactly how it got to a specific answer. So that's how we're using agentic with Swarm.
So, just to understand a little bit better about the company, and can you give examples of types of customers that you have and particular problems that you're solving with them, just so we can get a better sense of what Swarm does?
Yeah, happy to share that. Look, we're working in the grain space, helping solve network optimization allocation problems for grain milling and manufacturing. We do that successfully with a customer called Arden Mills today. We are in the fresh produce space where we are helping with workforce optimization as well as logistics planning for harvests, for example. We do that with AgriVision, the largest berry producer in Peru. We're starting to work with co ops as well, and that's a new area for us. And we are in the animal protein space, specifically in dairy, poultry, swine markets with a couple of customers in those areas. To give you some specific examples, right? Arden Mills manages and routes grain milling and manufacturing across 43 locations to serve over 1,000 customers. Classic supply chain with multiple moving parts that are ripe for optimization. Regal Springs is a fresh fish tilapia producer. So they run allocation, particularly in the aquaculture space. And before Swarm, the kind of decision that took several hours of manual work of pulling data, running scenarios, matching demand to supply, getting sign offs now takes about 90 seconds with Swarm.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
there are so many other examples like that.
Now that's really helpful. So a customer in like in those examples, they would come to you and they'd say, "This is this is our data problem, or this is our decision tree problem," or like how do they come to you with a defined problem, or do you look at their business and say, "This is these are places we could help," or both?
It can happen both ways. There are often times when customers will come and say, "Hey, I'm operating a business. It's got 2% operating margins, 98% cost. How do I optimize? Help us brainstorm." So we
Oh,
do a what's
wow.
possible session with the customer, and we do that for an hour and a half. We bring our data science team to the table that has worked on a variety of different projects. And we brainstorm with the customer on what is the low hanging fruit. Where is your data clean? Where is the data messy? What is the biggest impact that you can get if you optimize this particular area in your process? Then there are times when customers will come to us and say, "Hey, we are growing at the seams and we want to put a new warehouse location, and our customers want a certain time to delivery, a certain customer satisfaction score, and we're doing strategic pricing. Can you help us with this particular optimization?" So it works both ways.
No, that's really helpful because I see companies do several things. One, they try to build it internally and they don't know, or they buy some off the shelf, um, some kind of program or software, or deal with someone that doesn't understand agriculture. But I think that's a real value that you have to come in and really understand the problems that they're trying to solve, not just band-aid on some technology. So that's really helpful to understand.
Right, and I think that's the hype that exists in the market, right? Because I think generic AI solutions cannot solve that, and that's where vertical specific, domain specific AI comes into play.
So, where are companies beginning to move beyond experimentation and put agents to work on real business problems? You gave a couple examples, but kind of at large, what are you seeing out there?
I'm seeing customers starting to focus more, and this is one of my talking points when I am in front of prospects, when I'm speaking at events, is customers are focusing more on the business problem first rather than AI first. And in that, they're starting to identify what are the areas where I can augment the operator, not necessarily replace the operator, but augment the operator with the right skill sets and a good way to mechanize the large amounts of data that are coming into their business. Look, I mean, in a business, customers are wrestling with, and particularly in ag, they're wrestling with at least the biological aspect of the business itself, but they're also wrestling with volatility, tariffs, pricing, commodity structures. Logistics is a big, big play. Weather plays an important role in this as well. And they're struggling with, okay, how do we combine all of that information in order to be able to make better decisions to serve our customers better and also to improve our margins? And those are the kind of problems that we see and solve for customers.
So, what are you seeing inside companies that are interested in AI? And everyone's interested in AI, but are struggling to identify a starting point?
Vonnie, the pattern I see almost every time is the company is convinced that they need to fix their data before they can touch AI. So they spend a year on data cleanups that never quite finish. And meanwhile, the business keeps making the same slow decision it always has. But what they actually have isn't a data problem, it's more of a decision problem that they haven't named yet. And everyone can point to a system where they wish it could work better. Almost nobody points to a specific decision made every day, every week that actually determines whether they make or whether they lose money. The starting point was never the data, even though there's a lot of talk about it. The starting point is naming the decision and the business objective that you're trying to achieve with that decision and starting there.
So, you think instead of people going into this process of trying to figure out what's wrong with their data or unsilo their data, or that, but they should just start and talk to someone like you and just get going on the process instead of trying to do some other steps first. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that they should try to identify the business objective first of what are we trying to solve
Yeah.
and what are
Hmm.
we trying to optimize? What benefit does that have to the business? And then apply AI appropriately on top of that. Often we're finding that companies are jumping into a Me Too style solution of let's deploy Copilot or let's deploy Claude, and then realizing the token costs versus the ROI that they're not necessarily seeing from these horizontal AI deployments. And that's where vertical specific AI, domain specific AI that is tied to the constraints of your business can still be agentic in nature, right? With an optimization component to it. But it is specifically designed for the problems that you're trying to solve in your business. And that's the value that we're seeing a lot of customers starting to embrace now.
So, how can AI help companies capture and apply institutional and domain knowledge before it disappears? We had talked about that, a number of these people that are walking around with 40 years of institutional knowledge or walking out the doors. And so, how do we think about that of just capturing some of this information that might not even be in the data now?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Bonnie. I actually wrote a piece on this titled Farming Isn't Dying, the Knowledge Is, right? And
Ah,
how
that's great.
AI can actually help. Um, it it doesn't, AI doesn't learn from a manual because there isn't one. It learns from the decisions themselves, the actual calls that an experienced operator makes under real conditions. What they chose as a decision and why did they choose it, and over time that becomes something that a less experienced person can query. Not here's a rule book, but here's how someone with 30 years of pattern recognition could think about this problem right now, right? AI helps you capture that. And I think that's a significant advantage that customers have where using AI not only helps you with better decisions, but actually digitizes your data as well.
So we had talked when we were talking earlier just about the whole human in the loop issue, and a lot of solutions people are not having human in the loop, or if they have to have human in the loop, they see that as a limitation and a disadvantage. But you were saying in agriculture, you see that that's important. Talk a little bit about that.
I do, and I often say this, Vonnie, is that silicon needs carbon, right? Silicon being AI,
Yeah, I
carbon
love
being
that.
human forms. And when you look at software fails gracefully. You get an error, you retry, nobody gets hurt, right? Biology doesn't work that way. A herd, a crop, a harvest window, these are living systems on their own clock. And a wrong call doesn't necessarily give you a do over, right? That's the real reason why the human stays close in agriculture. It's not caution for its own sake. I think it's respect for what you're actually working with in agriculture. Ag doesn't live in certainty, it lives in motion. And in a world like that, AI doesn't replace the operator experience. It actually augments and compounds it. And that's why I don't think the future farm looks like a fully autonomous function. I think a future farm will be aware systems that sense and inform with a person still making calls that can't be undone. And I think when you do that with ag, you also attract new talent within the industry itself. There is a significant drain that is occurring, which you mentioned, right? People with 30, 40 years of experience retiring. And I think AI can really help digitize that knowledge and also help bring in new talent.
How does that work to try to digitize that knowledge? Does it need to come from that person, or is it somehow else? Does it come from other sources? Like, how is that knowledge digitized?
It can come from that person. It also comes from the questions that you're asking of AI, right? So think about a perspective where you're part of a co-op, and you're trying to get insights on which particular crops, which particular season, what to do with this particular instance, what to do if the weather is turning in this particular fashion, so on. When you're asking those questions of a ontology trained agent that is trained in ag, you're now starting to build a collection of questions and responses and feedback that you're providing and retraining that particular model, right? So the knowledge is more collective, but the digitization can be done central with agentic AI.
So, where do you see agentic AI delivering the strongest economic return in agriculture? Kind of what's happening now, and where do you see that going?
I don't think the biggest return is coming from having the most data anymore. It's going to come from having the fastest learner, the company that can turn signal into decision quickly, um, versus the company next to them. In a business with thin margins and real physical constraints, that speed compounds. It shows up in less waste. It shows up in fewer missed windows, better allocation, eventually in market share, because the slow decision maker loses to the fast one every single time.
So, you just completed a successful fundraising round. Congratulations. That's not a
Thank you.
easy thing to do in these times. So, talk a little bit about that process. And are investors becoming more selective about the distinction between promising technologies and solutions that create measurable business value? Or how are how are investors looking at companies differently in this kind of age of AI and data than they were, maybe the last time you did a round?
We're seeing more pragmatism. We're seeing more focus on value to deliver to the customer rather than the hype. AgTech pulled in about $2 billion in the second quarter of this year, spread across about 158 startups. And if you strip out one major deal that was there, which was over $500 million on a single satellite company, the real picture is that the sector is funding itself at a steady clip, close to about
Okay.
one and a half billion a quarter for 14 straight quarters now, right? Dating back to, I think, early 2023. And that's discipline, right? Meanwhile, the rest of the venture community has chased mega rounds in AI, deals over $100 million, ate up about 81% of capital deployed across all venture in the first half of this year alone, which is enormous, right?
Yeah.
We went through it. We went through a Series A process, and investors wanted to know which decisions our customers are making differently and what was that worth to our customers in dollars. Uh, the bar has moved from is this AI impressive to can you show me the outcome it produced? And it's very, very much in line, Bonnie, with customers that I talk to, particularly in the ag space, who say, drop the jargon, solve the problem. They're most interested in
I
looking
love
at it.
that.
They're most interested in looking at a pragmatic view of where's the value and what does that do for my business.
Yeah, it's good to see. It's interesting. I think we're coming a little bit out of the really big gloom and doom days of AgTech where no one felt like they could get
Hmm.
funded, and it's starting to pick up again. And so yeah, I think it's an interesting time. So let's close the conversation with two practical takeaways. What do you see as two takeaways from what you see out in the world and our conversation today?
Let's see. Two top takeaways. I would say the first is, and this is going to sound orthogonal to my desire, passion, and push around AI, is don't start with AI. Start with the business problem. Find the decision that actually is costing you money when it's slow or wrong, and work backwards from there. You don't need to clean the entire house to begin either. You don't need a perfect data set. You need data you already have. I see so many companies stuck in that, what I call data fatigue, right? Exhausted from a cleanup project that never ends, when they could have started solving a real problem months ago, with what was already sitting there. So I would say that first, define the business problem. Look, the second takeaway is that margin compression and volatility aren't going away. That's the baseline now, not a cycle. So think of AI spend like a springboard, not a renovation of the entire pool, right? Same water, same depth, just a small platform that turns small push into real height. And here's what that looks like in real numbers, right? Say you're a $100 million business at 2% um, operating margins, and that's $2 million of profit for the year. And you spend, I don't know, $200,000 in AI, get a 10% return. You've just found another $2 million without having to grow your top line to $100 million again. Same business, same water, but suddenly you're in a somewhere else entirely, and you've just expanded the margins in your business. So springboard, margin compression, volatility are not going away. Think of AI as a springboard, not as an entire renovation. Start quickly. Don't need to have the entire data cleaned up in your organization.
On the continuum of companies that aren't using any kind of AI or technology, or maybe just using a chatbot or two, to ones that have hired a bunch of software engineers and are trying to like build something on their own. How Where is agriculture on that continuum? And I know that many of the people that come and talk to you are probably further along, or they wouldn't know they needed you. But just as you're out in the world and looking at agriculture, where are we kind of compared to other industries, and how open do you think the industry is to these types of solutions?
I think the industry is very open to these type of solutions, provided that the industry can see tangible, repeatable, scalable, measurable value out of it. In terms of where the industry is on the spectrum, it's interesting because it really depends on which subsegment of the industry we're talking about. Ag is such a enormous market, right? That there are companies and organizations and farms that are on the spectrum of not doing anything, or even on the spectrum of doing cash-based accounting. And there are some dairy farms that are operating in that manner today, all the way to organizations that have hired a bunch of data scientists and have a small data science army in their organizations. It's a very broad spectrum in a enormous market. And where we are finding a lot of interest is around the fact that organizations have experimented with AI, particularly with horizontal AI and chatbot technology, and are starting to now realize the tokenization costs commensurate to their return on investment. And that's not matching up well for them. And they're starting to realize that we need more and more vertical specific, domain specific experience around AI, which they're not getting from the horizontal AI solutions. And hence this desire and push and directional vector in the direction of vertical specific AI solutions.
Great, that makes sense. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was really great to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Vonnie.